I used to think the ocean erased mistakes. That's what the locals in Greymarsh say. Storms wash the boardwalk clean, spring tides carry away the bottle shards, the wind sands down what's left. I moved here with my wife, Sarah, because our old life felt like a room we could no longer breathe in. In the city, every argument echoed. Here, the gulls drowned us out. Or so I thought. We rented a weather-worn house that leaned toward the harbor like it wanted to listen. A fog bell tolled from the breakwater, patient as a metronome. On good mornings, Sarah stood on the porch wrapped in my sweater, hair in a lazy knot, making lists on the back of grocery receipts. She'd hum under her breath while the kettle shivered. I loved her most in those ordinary minutes, the ones nobody posts, the ones you never imagined missing. The first odd thing was a key. We found it in a kitchen drawer, the kind of old brass that remembers other hands. Sarah held it up to the window. For the lighthouse, maybe. The lighthouse sat on a knuckle of rock, half a mile off the eastern dunes, connected by a causeway that went under at high tide. The light was retired, but people still hiked out when the ocean was in a kind mood. The keeper's cottage had burned a decade earlier. Nothing out there needed a key. We laughed, dropped it back in the drawer, forgot it the way you forget a thread until it snags your cuff. Greymarsh is the sort of place where gossip replaces weather when the forecast is steady. The baker told me which families feuded over which fences. The bait shop owner taught me the names of fog sea smoke, pea soup, ghosting, and the names of wind's nor'easter. Cat's paw, widow's breath. Widow's breath, he said, arrives at midnight and leaves hinges whispering. I didn't ask him who coined it. I didn't want a name to have a face. Sarah found work inventorying a gallery that specialized in found things. Corroded cleats, ship's glass, Polaroids from vanished summers. She arranged objects like she was lining up memories for cross-examination. At night, she came home with salt on her cuffs and stories about strangers' nostalgia. Sometimes she pressed a piece of beach glass into my palm, green as old wine, and said, "Keep this," as if we could ward off bad endings with softened edges. One evening, just after equinox, the sky performed one of those theatrical sunsets coastal towns used to sell T-shirts. Sarah had stayed late. I made chowder and left it warming, wiped the table twice, rinsed the ladle again because I couldn't stand to wait with idle hands. When the latch slipped, I called, "You're late," and it came out more accusing than I meant. She set down her bag like it was full of water and said, "There was a meeting." What kind of meeting does a gallery have after dark? The kind where the owner decides to become a philanthropist, she said, but her voice wore its company smile, the one that ends sentences early. She kissed my cheek and said the chowder smelled like summer. Later in bed, she lay on her side, back to me, the way she did when she wanted to sleep and not talk. Her breathing found that slow, even rhythm I used to match my own to. I lay there and stared at the ceiling and counted the seconds between the bell and the soft slap of small waves against the mudflats. The second odd thing was a notebook. It was the gallery's, she said, because the logo was embossed on the back. I wasn't snooping. It was left on the porch table beneath a coil of twine. When I moved it to wipe away sand, it fell open. The page said, Tideglass, 11:40 p.m., low water, 0.2, and beneath that, a list of initials. Sarah's was among them, written small, as if trying not to belong to itself. Tideglass? I asked that night, casual, like you ask about a new menu item you're not sure you'll order. A collector's event, she said. Invitation only. Sounds fancy. It's just a bunch of older weirdos who think a shard of a bottle is holy, she said, but the joke sounded like it was wearing the wrong teeth. At 11:36 p.m. the next night, I heard the porch steps mutter. I got up quiet as a thief and watched from the bedroom window. Sarah wore her long black raincoat, the one that makes her look like a silhouette cut from night. She walked east along the shore lane, toward the causeway. The tide was running low, the flats shining like a spill of mercury. A handful of people merged from different directions, each a shadow within larger darkness. They moved together without speaking. I put on boots and followed at a distance, learning that fog can hide you even when it isn't there. The causeway was exposed, barnacles bright as old teeth in flashlight cones. They walked single file over rock, past the crumbled steps where the keeper's cottage had been. down toward the base of the lighthouse, where the water chews the foundation like a bored animal. There, on a ledge just above the fanged high-water line, the group circled. They carried old bottles, green, brown, pale blue some, with melted lips, some with mouths chipped like they'd bitten rope and lost. The wind pressed our clothes against our shapes, made us all look sketched. No one spoke. Sarah stood with her head bowed, hands in her pockets, as if warming them on a secret. The oldest man, his beard the color of the surf when it turns under the moon, took a piece of beach glass from a pouch and held it up. Even in that gray light, it caught memory. He said, "We gather to seal what the sea refuses to swallow." They passed a black book. Each offered a line. When it came to Sarah, my name hovered like a taste in my mouth I couldn't place. She wrote and kept the book. The circle shifted, and a woman I recognized from the post office placed a corked bottle on the ledge. Inside it, a scrap of paper and something darker in the bottom sand. Ash? The old man took a hammer and drove a nail through the cork, pinning it like an insect, then slid the bottle into a hollow beneath the stones where the tide would cover it in an hour. The group hummed, not a tune, not chant, just breath-aligned. Then they walked back across the causeway as if they'd only gone out to check the weather. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the tide return. Watched the lights switch off out there when the first wave covered the ledge. Felt the house breathe like it had lungs. Sarah came in at 12:23 a.m., eyes shining in that way you can't fake. She looked at me and looked at the kettle and looked at my hands around the mug and said, "Couldn't sleep?" I said I'd had coffee too late. She nodded like two liars agreeing to be kind. In the morning, the notebook was gone. I decided two things. First, I'd ask. Second, I'd ask in a way I didn't have to recover from. So I waited until Saturday, when the weather had one of those early storms that make fishermen become storytellers and tourists become philosophers. I made eggs, burned the first batch, pretended not to, made the second batch perfect to atone. She ate half and pushed the plate away and said, "Ask me." "Ask you what?" "The thing you've been preparing in your head. What is Tideglass?" She laughed, but not like something was funny. "It's nothing," she said. "It's how people here survive their losses. We make time capsules. We sink them where the sea agrees." "And the initials in the notebook?" "People who've put something away." "What did you put away?" She looked at her hands until the quiet went heavy enough to break. "I wrote your name." "Why?" "So the sea would keep what I can't." "What can't you keep?" She closed her eyes. "You, if you keep asking questions like you're trying to prove I'm betraying you. You, if you keep treating me like a door you're testing for locks." "I followed you," I said, because it felt poisonous to hide it. "I saw the bottles, I saw the hammer. It looked like burying." "It is," she said. "That's the point. What are we burying? We're still here." She didn't answer. The bell tolled, and the rain slowed, and somewhere, a screen door clapped with impatience. I told myself I'd let it go. I didn't. Obsession is just curiosity that found caffeine. I started noticing things. How Sarah smelled like rope and sea smoke after late nights. How she kept her raincoat by the back door. How her phone, which used to live on the coffee table like a cat, now stayed in her pocket like a confession. I found the key again when I wasn't looking for it. This time, instead of dropping it, I held it until the metal warmed, until my palm smelled like the past. On a map in the library, I saw the lighthouse had a maintenance hatch on the lee side, long sealed after the fire. The key in my hand felt wrong for doors and right for something that didn't want to be called that. 2 nights later, the initials in the notebook showed up under a flyer at the grocer. Not the names, just the letters in a column, as if someone wanted anyone to find them and no one to understand. The old man from the circle, his name, I learned, was Reeve paid for his rye bread, and palmed the column so smoothly I wondered if my eyes had invented it. I waited for low water and took the causeway alone. The ocean was in a generous mood, flat as a lie told by a practiced mouth. I carried a small flashlight between my teeth and kept my hands free. At the lighthouse, I found the hatch corroded around the edges, as if the sea had been deciding it for years. The key slid in and turned with the reluctant shear of something that both resents and welcomes being touched. The hatch coughed up a smell like old nets and burned rope. Inside, a narrow chamber where the sea had once kissed concrete when the storms tried to climb in. A brace of old steps. A table up against a wall, scavenged, with a ledger and a tin box and a brass mallet whose head bore half-moons. On a shelf, 20 bottles, some with crushed corks nailed through their throats, some with wax seals, some with rope around their middles like they needed help staying closed. It wasn't a secret society. It was an archive of drownings that hadn't learned how to stay under. I opened the ledger because that's what men do in stories when they shouldn't, and because I was no longer inside a story I recognized. Each entry had a date, initials, a single sentence, and a sketch. The sentences read like riddles people use when they don't dare write the truth. For what was left on a Saturday. For the name he answered to when he didn't answer me. For the house without a table. On the newest page, SB. For what I ruined to survive. The sketch was a house leaning toward water, which could have been any house here or ours particularly, depending on how paranoid you felt. I felt precisely that much. I don't know how long I stood there with other people's grief on my hands. Long enough for the waterline outside to move 3 inches. Long enough for a gull to decide I belonged and stop circling. When I came out, the tide had turned, and the causeway had that dark sheen that means hurry or swim. I hurried. Back at shore, an orange rain slicker I knew blocked my path. "You went in," Reeve said, not upset so much as unsurprised. "It was open," I said. "Nothing out here is open by accident," he said, "and nothing opens by accident either." "I'm not here to break anything," I said, which was true if you define break as smash and not as understand too much. He looked past me at the line where sea met sky. "People bring their glass to me when they don't trust themselves not to throw it." "Why the bottle?" I asked. "So hands have something to do," he said. "If your hands are busy, your mouth might choose better words." "What did my wife write?" I asked, because nuance is for men who slept. "It isn't my business to say," he said. "It isn't mine." He looked back at me. His eyes had the pale depth of water over sand. "It's your business to decide if you're asking to know or asking to win. There's a brand of shame that tastes like salt you didn't earn." I felt it then. I walked around him and back along the lane and made it home before Sarah. I sat on the steps and waited like a verdict. When she arrived, she dropped her bag and saw me and stopped the way you stop when you realize you're about to pass through metal detectors with too much in your pockets. "You went," she said. "I did." "What did you take?" "Nothing," I said, and for once the truth sounded truthful. "What did you read?" "I read the sentences people write when they're scared of saying the real one." She sat beside me on the step like we were new again. The fog bell counted to 3. "I'm afraid you think the real one is that I'm cheating," she said. "Aren't you?" It came out too fast, a knife I'd been choking on. "No," she said, and my body believed before my mind agreed. "But I did something you won't like. Try me." "I started going to Tideglass because I couldn't stop rehearsing leaving you," she said. "Not because of someone else. Because I didn't know how to be someone in a small place with one person who knew all my names. The bottles are vows to stop breaking things I still want. I wrote your name because I wanted to put away the version of you I'd turned into a stranger to justify rehearsal." "That sentence is a maze," I said, but my hands had already warmed. "Why at night?" "Because people are braver when the sea looks like a wall," she said. "Because secrets feel smaller when the rocks are wet. Because the light is off out there and on in here." She touched my chest. "And we need the contrast to see what we're doing." "And the key?" I asked. "For the days when we forget, we promise to sink the worst versions," she said. "We open the room and remind ourselves there's nowhere to put the past except underwater." I wanted to believe her. I also wanted something simpler to hate. "Whose are?" I asked, and hated the sound of myself counting initials like bullets. "Reeve," she said again, "the man who keeps people from calling themselves storms." "Was there ever—" "No," she said. "If there had been, I would have used a different bottle." That night, with our hands on the same mug, we spoke like people who've learned how to be precise without drawing blood. I said I kept a ledger in my head of everything I did right and used it to buy permission to be lazy. She said she kept a ledger of everything I did wrong and used it to avoid asking for what she wanted. The fog bell tolled. We agreed to sleep with the window open just enough to let wind replace the stale air we'd made. But that's not the end. The end arrived a week later, wearing rain and a question. A nor'easter marched in early, stiff-backed, humorless. The harbor threw its boats against their lines like dogs test fences. Around midnight, the power went. I found the lantern, pumped it, lit it, set it on the table. Sarah pulled on her boots and said, "We should check the slats. The porch will flood." While I dragged the boards across the steps, I noticed a second light moving along the line of the dunes, steady as if it belonged to someone who had a map of the dark. I turned my lantern down and watched. The light reached the causeway and paused at the sign that says, in plain words, "Don't." Then it moved on anyway. I knew the tide schedule. I'd read it like I read the back of cereal boxes. Low water was 12:18, surge added 6 inches. The causeway would hum with danger by 12:35. The light reached the foot of the lighthouse and began to swing in small circles. I heard a voice too far to recognize, close enough to understand. "Hello? It's me. I brought it." Sarah had come out behind me without sound. She saw where I looked and said, "We should go." "We shouldn't," I said, and heard the old man's sentence about accidents. "Who is it?" "Someone who keeps the wrong kind of bottle," she said, teeth on her lower lip. "If we don't go, they'll put it somewhere worse." The ocean has a habit of making small people believe in large ideas. We took the lantern and a coil of rope and crossed the causeway the way a person makes a confession quickly, because thinking would end it. The surge licked our ankles and then decided to bite. At the lighthouse, the lightmaker turned and became a face I almost knew. He was our landlord's son, back after a long absence. The type who used to surf without fear and talk like time owed him. He held a bottle uncorked, paper already damp. His jaw trembled, not from cold. "I thought I could," he said when he saw us. "I thought I could do it without agency." Agency in Gray Marsh means the people you call when someone goes missing, and everyone knows it isn't because they forgot where home is. "What's in the bottle?" Sarah asked gently. "My father," he said, and then, embarrassed by drama, corrected himself. "His letters, to the woman he loved more than my mother. He asked me to burn them. I couldn't. I thought if I put them with the others—" "They were never the others," Sarah said. "You don't drown other people's words." "They're poison," he insisted. "Then don't drink them," I said, surprising myself. The surge hit the ledge where the circle gathers, tore foam into ropes. Behind us, the causeway shortened. Reeves' warning sat in my ear like a stone. Sarah reached for the bottle. "Let me," she said. The young man hesitated, then gave it up the way a child gives up a blade he's already nicked himself on. She looked at the paper inside and at the storm, and at him and at me. She set the bottle on the flat part of the foundation, took the brass mallet from the hatch, and nailed the cork. Not through the center, but through the lip, so it sealed without splitting. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice thin with panic. "Keeping your promise," she said, "but in a way that doesn't worship the worst parts." She didn't slide the bottle into the hollow. She tied rope around its neck and lowered it into the water so it bobbed, kept, not lost. "The sea can't keep this," she said. "We'll keep it. We'll read them when the storm passes and then decide what to bury." His shoulders dropped, as if someone had taken an anvil from his pocket. "Okay," he whispered. The way people say it when they don't mean agreement so much as gratitude. We turned to go. The causeway hissed a warning. We made it halfway when a wave shouldered the rocks and shoved. I lost footing and went knee-deep, then thigh. Then Sarah's hand found the back of my coat and Reeves' rope. How had he appeared, snapped around the iron post on shore, and hummed with a sudden weight? The landlord's son grabbed my arm, and for a second, we were a human chain, unwilling to learn how to say widow's breath. We made it. On the lane, soaked to bones and ideas, we watched the causeway disappear under white water, then brown, then the strange black that means the sea is turning pages too fast. The landlord's son cried and didn't hide it. Reeve nodded once and took the other end of the rope, the one that held the bottle to a cleat, sunk in our porch. "We'll read in the morning," he said. which sounded like the kindest threat I'd ever heard. We read. The letters were exactly what the young man had promised and exactly what he hadn't understood. A map of a man's weaknesses drawn in ink a young woman thought was love. They didn't belong underwater. They belonged in a forgiveness that sometimes looks like fire, and sometimes like a drawer with a lock, and sometimes like daylight on a kitchen table while coffee goes cold. After we finished, the young man put them back in the bottle dry. He said he would take them to his mother and tell the truth and accept whatever storm she chose. He did. She moved out. She moved back in. They painted the little bedroom blue. Human things, not ocean things. As for Sarah and me, the night we crossed the causeway, with a rope between us, changed what I thought betrayal looks like. I had been rehearsing a courtroom where my questions cross-examined her answers until one of us lost. She had been rehearsing a rehearsal where leaving me was the only way to hear herself think. Tideglass didn't erase either. It asked us to bury versions of ourselves that used damage as proof of being alive. A week later, Sarah slid the brass key across the table. "We should give it back," she said. "To who?" "To the next people who think secrets go underwater." We walked it to Reeve. He didn't take it. He pushed it back. "You keep it," he said. "Not to go in. To remember you don't need to." I keep it in the drawer with rubber bands and pens that skip and a tape measure that lies by an inch. Some mornings I take it out and hold it and imagine the hatch and the bottles and the ledger with its sentences that would rather be drawings. I think about how easy it would be to sink something instead of say it. Then I put the key back and say the thing. If you're listening and waiting for a twist where I discover Sarah, in fact, had someone else the whole time, a contractor or a fisherman or a man who talks to storms, I'm sorry. The twist is quieter. She had a room in her head with a door I didn't know about, and I had a courtroom in mine. We didn't bulldoze them. We drew maps. We invited each other in daylight, no causeway, no fog. On certain nights when the moon is careless and the sea remembers teeth, you can hear the bottles under the lighthouse clink like wind chimes. People say it's ghosts. Reeves says it's glass telling other glass not to cut. I stand with Sarah on the porch, her hand inside my sweater sleeve, and we listen. And when the bell tolls, we answer with the softest thing we own, the truth kept above water. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.